On today's show, who are the top 10 NHL affiliated two-way forwards? We'll look at that on today's episode of Locked On NHL Prospects.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this podcast, we break down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday to Friday. I'm Hadi Kalikesh, Director of North American Scouting for Dobber Prospects, joined by Sebastian High, Director of European Scouting for Dobber Prospects. And on today's show, we'll be breaking down the top 10 NHL-affiliated two-way forwards. We'll go through 3 honorable mentions plus picks 10 through 8 in the first segment. We'll get picks 7 through 4 in the second, and then we'll go into the top 3 in the final segment. So make sure to stick around to the end. Before we get into any of that, though, today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. If you're watching on YouTube, please remember to like and subscribe. Leave us a comment letting us know what you think of the episode, what you want us to talk about next. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, please leave us a rating review and make sure to make us your first listen of the day. So let's get things started right away here with our 3 honorable mentions among the top two-way forwards in the NHL systems. And we'll start off at the bottom here with David Edstrom, recently traded to the San Jose Sharks, and he's been looking fairly good. He was a late first-round draft pick of the Vegas Golden Knights. He's been looking pretty good in Sweden. Talk me through his game overall and what makes him make the honorable mentions list.
Yeah, he's a very solid two-way forward. He plays the game in a very simple and linear way. He's not a player that's going to overwhelm you with dynamic skill or puck carrying ability, but he's a really solid net front presence offensively. He gets into the dangerous areas. He's really like a good goal scorer also from in tight with good hand-eye coordination, quick reflexes, solid anticipation, and defensively he's able to leverage his physicality, his strength, as well as solid scanning habits to just be a very consistent defensive piece. He's not going to be a Selke candidate in his career, but I think he's going to be a solidifying defensive bottom 6 center long-term for the San Jose Sharks, in a mold of prospect that they don't have very much of in their system either, which makes sense why they targeted him in that Thomas Hertl deal. I think he's a really solid defensive piece, quite comparable to other guys that could have also cracked the HMs here, like Cole Baudouin, for instance, who we like a lot as well, in a similar mold of built very strong, does the small things very well, and is overall quite reliable wherever he's deployed, and also a very natural center for David Edstrom. But another natural center that we have here in the honorable mentions is Dalibor Dvorsky, who we talked about a decent amount in yesterday's episode. A really solid player at both ends of the ice, a really heavy shot offensively, solid physical tools. He's heavily built. He's just 6 feet, but he's over 200 pounds. And his defensive instincts are a real area of strength. He scans well. He uses his anticipation to block defensive lanes. He's consistently making micro adjustments to stay in the dangerous passing lanes and to keep track of his assignments defensively. And his overall a projection as a middle 6 two-way centerman with real goal scoring and power forward upside as well. But the defensive area is an area of strength. But wrap up here the honorable mentions with Andrew Basha, a player that we've both liked a lot in this past draft year. What makes him such a solid two-way forward?
Absolutely. So Andrew Basha is all about pace. He's 5'11", 185 pounds, tiny bit undersized, but the energy, the speed on him is absolutely ridiculous. He's full pedal to the metal constantly. Played kind of in the shadow of Caden Lindstrom and Gavin McKenna with the Medicine Hat Tigers in the WHL this past year, which let them being picked a decent amount later than I would have had him. I had him in my 20s. I'm a big fan of Andrew Basha's game overall. But yeah, overall, I think that really what makes his game tick is the energy and the pace. He's always full speed. And once Caden Lindstrom was injured and Andrew Basha was asked to take a bigger role with that team, he really showed what he could do with them and kind of displayed that ability in his game. Overall, I really like the game with Basha. Again, the energy, the pace is through the roof, and he's defensively responsible. He's defensively capable. So he definitely is meriting of making this honorable mentions list. But let's get right into the top 10. We start here at 10th overall with Igor Chernyshov, the recent 33rd overall pick of the San Jose Sharks in the 2024 NHL draft. You've watched him a ton this year, so have I. We're both big fans of his defensive game. That especially was on display in the KHL, right?
Absolutely. He was a fantastic defensive piece for Dynamo Moscow. And one of the big reasons that he was a lock inside my top 20 all season long was that, yes, he has a bunch of offensive tools: the handling, the goal scoring, the ability to drive the middle of the ice against professional competition. Again, like the handling is really, really nice. He's
Yep.
also quite mobile, and he's very direct as well. When he sees an opening, he charges for it and powers his way through it if it closes on him. But what really elevated his stock for me was just how reliable he was in the defensive zone. He's a really, really active scanner. He's constantly applying pressure. He's constantly waiting for the right moment to close his gaps. He's very cerebral in how he's able to defend and very aware in the defensive zone. Even as a winger, he was consistently dropping low in the defensive zone to support his defenders. There were a couple games I watched where he was playing almost a center role as a winger at the KHL level in
Yep.
terms of the defensive zone responsibilities. And he's able to leverage his really long range as well as his physicality to take space and time away from opponents defensively. And also links up really nicely in transition. He's a quick one-touch passer. The playmaking game still needs a bunch of work, but the actual passing mechanics are good even in tight, and especially in the neutral zone. It's a tool that really is able to open up the ice for his team and to spark quick counterattacks even when he's not the primary puck carrier. So he's a player we've liked a lot. Likely fell a bit in the draft to only having scored 3 goals and 4 points in 34 KHL games this season, but those were exclusively bottom 6 minutes, and he was so good defensively, on top of having all these offensive tools that didn't translate into production at that level. I think there's a lot to be excited for with Igor Chernyshov, and as you mentioned, just fantastic value at 33rd overall for San Jose. But next, we have a very different style of player, a guy who was drafted 2 years ago and is an undersized centerman with really impressive offensive intelligence and creativity, but his defensive contributions are also really strong in Noah Östlund. Talk me through his game a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. So he was drafted 16th overall by the Buffalo Sabres. I thought that was a fantastic selection at that point. I was a big fan of Östlund's game. He was in my top 10 pretty much the entire year. Great value as a playmaker, as a handler, as a creative force, but he also has the ability to just pick apart offensive formations on the defensive end of the puck and off the puck. It's less about effort and engagement and energy, and it's a lot more about kind of the tactical brain side of the defensive game. He understands the defensive game really well. He anticipates plays extremely well. He can predict where the puck's going to go and kind of intervene in those situations. Overall, Noah Östlund, I mean, I don't think he gets enough credit for his defensive side of his game. It's a real strength in his game. And it really has to do with that processing, that awareness, and he's kind of in the mold of a couple other prospects that are going to be ahead of him in these rankings. But for me, he's a bit too offensive leaning in his habits overall to place him any higher in this board. But still, the awareness, the intelligence of processing, the anticipation, it's all there defensively with Östlund. I think he's a great prospect on the defensive side of the game, and that's why he's 9th overall on our list. And to close things off, we have Nate Danielson, the big center who was drafted, I want to say 9th overall in the 2022 draft by the Detroit Red Wings. Yeah. I wouldn't have picked him that high, but he's the definition of a two-way center. He understands the game defensively, but he also has the effort level and engagement there. I think that he definitely puts in second and third efforts. He's a player who consistently gets involved in back checks, in forechecks, and all sorts of defensive situations. Top penalty killing minutes in the OHL so far, in the WHL so far. So this is a prospect who genuinely has the full package defensively. I think his whole game needs to step up, and it mainly has to do with the skating deficiencies and limitations. With Nate Danielson, I don't think he cuts corners as effectively, so it makes him a bit exploitable on forechecks. You can bait him in and then kind of skate through him or skate across him fairly easily, and he gets left in the dust. But outside of those circumstances and those situations, I have trouble finding a fault with Danielson's defensive game. It's well-rounded, it's refined, it's energetic, it's purposeful. Nate Danielson has a lot of value as a defensive center. Again, I wouldn't draft that archetype of player at all in the top 10 unless they have really good offensive upside, but he's still a very good prospect. And that wraps things up for our first segment. We'll get into our second, where we talk about picks 7 through 4. We'll get into more detail about the prospects in that range in just a second, but just before, a quick words from our sponsors at Gametime. If you're looking to buy cheap tickets last minute to any event, Gametime is the best place to get them. Gametime is safe, secure, affordable, easy to use. You name it, they've got it. It's not just for sports either. It's for anything that requires tickets, whether that's sports, comedy, theater, whatever you're looking for. As long as it requires tickets, you can find them on Gametime. And they are obsessed with saving you money. They've got so many different ways to help you save, from flash deals to zone deals to last-minute deals, where you can get up to 60% off last-minute tickets over at Gametime. And the Gametime guarantee, make sure that you always get the best price for your tickets. If you find a ticket in the same section and row for less than what Gametime has to offer you, Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL at checkout for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply, but again, it's super simple. You just create an account and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase at Gametime. So download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Alright, so let's roll right through here to picks 7 through 4 in our top 10 list of NHL-affiliated two-way forwards. We start off here with a recent selection at 13th overall that shocked a bunch of people, including Zane Parekh. If you've seen the NHL's draft video, he was shocked as well by the selection of Jet Luchenko at 13th overall, but he's a really good defensive forward. Overall, I mean, his game, if you look at it in detail, everything he does has everything to do with intelligence, awareness, processing, but he also has the energy, the effort level, the skating, the athleticism. There's just so much to his defensive game that works really well and projects really well at the NHL level. So do you think that's the main reason that Philly selected him at 13th here ahead of someone like Konsta Helenius?
Yeah, I think there's a multitude of reasons for that choice at the end of the day, and I think his combination of, as you mentioned, athleticism, two-way impact, being very young for the draft class. He only turns 18 in late August. He's still about a month away from turning 18 years old, and on top of that, his progression over the course of the season was really quite staggering for the Guelph Storm. He scored 20 goals and 74 points in 68 games this season. As a D-1 last year, he scored 5 goals and 14 points in 46 games. He took a really big step this season for Guelph, and his defensive impact, his intelligence, his ability to read play faster than his opponents are all clear areas of strength. He's a solid playmaker offensively, and he's able to leverage his intensity, his high motor to access dangerous areas as well. There's definitely still a lot of development left for this player in order to really unlock the very clear top 6 upside, but the second line potential, I think, it is certainly there. And while I have my own fair share of questions in terms of his ability to be a first liner, especially because he plays his best hockey down the middle at center, I don't think this is a player that you want as your 1C long term when you're building a contending team. But if he can continue to round out his game and become a reliable second line centerman, it's the same role that Konsta Helenius would have held anyways. And with Luchenko, you have an added level of intensity compared to Helenius. And you've also seen a bit more progression in just the last year. And he's younger than Helenius. And he plays in North America. I'm sure they got more viewings with him than they did with Helenius. There's a bunch of reasons that Philadelphia may have made that selection, and certainly a divisive one. That said, a player that is immediately going to win the hearts of Flyers fans when he makes his starts in the league. He plays the game that you want Philadelphia Flyers to play. He's intense. He never takes a shift off. He's reliable in all 3 zones. He creates. He's going to also play his best hockey in the playoff environment. There's a lot to like here.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll just move right on here to our 6th prospect rank, and this Callum Ritchie, a prospect we both watched a decent amount. Ritchie was selected by the Colorado Avalanche a couple of drafts ago, and he's been looking really, really good since his draft year. Continued the progression in his defensive game, which is already pretty strong in his draft year. It's only gotten better since. He mainly kind of relies on playmaking and distribution in order to create offensively, but defensively, he's another prospect who a lot of his game goes through the more energetic effort level type of situation, rather than focusing more on the hockey sense, processing, anticipation, like we talked about with Östlund. With Ritchie, a lot of his game revolves around that kind of energetic presence, that physical presence down low, that ability to just be a thorn in people's sides on the forecheck is mainly what stands out for me with Callum Ritchie. Overall, I think that Ritchie's game has progressed a decent amount in the last few years, both offensively and defensively. And the defensive progressions are really what put him in this range for us, ahead of Luchenko, ahead of Danielson, mainly because that effort level, that energy, it's always been there. He's just been less capable of applying it, and really intelligent and kind of thought out ways. I feel like the processing has come a decent amount, even though the foundation of his defensive game is still energy, motor, effort level, engagement. He's added layers of forethought and anticipation to it. Would you agree?
I totally would, and I also think his offensive game has improved significantly. This is a very intelligent player with the puck on his stick, and he was a man on an island in Oshawa for his first 2 seasons in the OHL, his D-1 in his draft year season. But this past year, he got a lot more support playing with guys like Beckett Seneca. And in 50 games in the regular season this year, he scored 28 goals and 80 points. He really, really took a big step offensively with that extra support. He has kind of fallen more into his comfortable role, which is not to be the offensive fulcrum, but rather to be an offensive distributor who's really playing with space and with time, rather than being the guy that carries the puck and finishes his chances like night in, night out. He's at his best when he's playing link-up play with his line mates and really playing in the system and playing a very cerebral hockey both on and off puck. And I've loved his progression. I think he's going to be a fantastic 2 or 3C for Colorado for a really long time. And I think that it's also an organization that's going to get the best out of his specific toolkit because he is so intense, as you mentioned, and intelligent. And his skating is still going to take a couple steps before he becomes an NHL regular. And there's so much to like here with the combination of tools and intelligence on both sides of the puck. But next up, we have a player that we've both really, really, really loved going back to his draft year, and that's Oliver Moore, who had a slightly slow start in the NCAA in terms of production, but really ramped it up in the second half of the season for the University of Minnesota, ending up with 9 goals and 33 points through 39 games after being under half a point a game by December. But this is a 5'11", 194-pound left shot centerman, a very natural centerman, who was selected 19th overall by the Chicago Blackhawks. What makes him such an impactful two-way center, in your opinion?
Speed. Like, it's just he's the fastest, most energetic skater I've ever seen. If you watch him skate, it feels like you're watching a thoroughbred. Just barrel his way down the ice with so much energy. And it's so weird to call him a thoroughbred because he's 5'11", 185 pounds. Like, he's not the biggest guy. But the way he skates, he just skates with so much effort, so much energy, so much power. I've constantly called him just basically a Dylan Larkin regen. And I think that's an apt comparison. Like, both of them are amazing skaters mechanically and in terms of the output overall. Cover so much ice, have so much energy, have the ability to win face-off, create on the forecheck, and be good playmakers, but also have a decent shot. That's Oliver Moore to a T. I think that his game overall is progression in the right ways, even though his first half of the season with in the NCAA wasn't ideal. He really stepped his game up in the second half of the season for them. He went a point per game in the final stretch of the season as well. Like, he was back on top and back to full form by the end of the year. So I don't have much concern about Oliver Moore's progression. I think that he's still on the right path to be a middle six, energetic, possibly, more likely second line center. And he has defensive capabilities for it. And a lot of that goes through that motor, that skating, that energy. He's one of the most dogged forecheckers and back checkers you'll see. So responsible with his positioning, so responsible with his engagement and the way that he gets involved in scrums. He has a really good mind for when he needs to go into corners and win battles, and when he just needs to sit back and let play develop and react to plays. So overall, there's just so much that works well with Oliver Moore, but everything flows through that speed and that energy. Those are the real main standouts, and that's why he's in the top 5 for us among two-way forwards. And that brings us to 4th overall, where we talk about another NCAA forward in Ryan Leonard, who seems to come up again and again every single time we talk about these kinds of rankings and just about the top end of prospects in general. And Ryan Leonard is... he's just pure energy, pure doggedness, pure determination. Everything he does at full speed and with the most energy that he can muster. And that's what made him, on a lot of nights, the best player on a stacked team in Boston College. We've talked about him at length already in terms of his power forward abilities, his goal scoring skill, but the defensive game is a real strength with Ryan Leonard. And that's what makes him so special. And that's what makes him so versatile as well. He can play center, he can play right wing, he can play left wing. It doesn't matter. You know why? Because he puts the same level of energy into wherever he plays. That's what makes him so unique as a prospect, and that's what makes him a favorite of anyone who likes scouting. You just love to root for these players. It's impossible not to. But that wraps things up for our second segment. We'll get into our third, where we talk more in detail about the top 3 NHL-affiliated two-way forwards. But just before, a quick word from our sponsors at FanDuel.
I love sports. I love them so much that I just never want them to stop. And the summer lull is here. We have a lot less leagues and a lot less sports to be watching over the course of the summer. But FanDuel still lets me keep the sports going all summer long, because all I have to do is open up the app and dream up bets anytime I want, wherever I am at. This summer, FanDuel is also hooking up every single customer with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for every single person, every single day, all summer long. Whether you want to take your swings on the golf championships currently going on, or Major League Baseball, there's still a lot to be interested in and look forward to this summer in terms of sports, even though the NHL playoffs have wound down, as well as the Euros and Copa America now having come to an end. So head on over to FanDuel.com/lockedon and make the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball.
Alrighty, so let's move on right away to the top 3 NHL-affiliated two-way forwards, and I'll spoil you already. We've got 3 2024 NHL draft eligibles here in the top 3. And we'll start off at third overall with a prospect that we've both been huge fans of. It's just that in our rankings, there's just always a question regarding the offensive upside, and it's Konsta Helenius. And what makes Helenius so special is really the processing, right? It's less about, he still has the energy, he still has the effort level, but it's nowhere near how good he is at processing and understanding the defensive game, right?
Absolutely. This is a very cerebral player. He's not the biggest guy in the world at 5'11", 190, but this is a right shot centerman who's a really natural centerman who played fantastic hockey all season long in Liga for Ukaret. He played 51 games in the regular season, scoring 14 goals and 36 points. And in the playoffs, he went a point a game through 6 games. So he's a player who is able to leverage his intelligence to create advantages in every single zone on the ice. He reads the game better than the vast majority of professional players at the Liga level already as an 18-year-old. And in the defensive zone, he, as you mentioned, isn't necessarily the most proactive in terms of energy output, because he likes to take a little step back to observe how the overall structure of his own defense, as well as the offense, is evolving. And he's able to pick and choose his spots. He's able to spot the high danger options that the opposition has and get in the way to block those passing lanes, and just constantly has his head on a swivel, constantly reading the ice, constantly trying to figure out ways to impact the game with his positioning. And he's able to pick and choose his moments to close his gaps and apply pressure really intelligently as well. He's not a player that's going to take himself out of the play in order to apply pressure. He does so in a really calculated method. And offensively, I think the playmaking game could become the fulcrum of his offensive output, but at this stage, he's still more of a distributor and a quarterback offensively, who kind of launches play down one of the wings, whether it be on the power play or at even strength, and allows his more dynamic wingers to do like the heavy lifting of offensive creation. But he's able to pick and choose his spots very intelligently, and I think that if he's developed as a pure playmaker, he could eventually become one. But just as he's currently constructed, he's really a facilitator offensively, who's able to create space and time for his teammates, take intelligent routes on and off puck, and also get the puck to to players that can create dangerous plays from where they are situated. So he's more of a secondary assist guy than a primary assist guy, rather than going for like the Hail Mary pass, cutting through defenses to a player in a shooting position. He makes the play before that more often than not. But overall, a very intelligent and projectable player who will be a middle six piece in the NHL in a year or two, probably. He won't take too much time to develop, and I think that Buffalo's in a great position with him in their system, alongside guys like Zach Benson, who play a relatively similar style from a distance, but are more active, perhaps, and more offensively gifted than Helenius is, which also frees up Helenius to just play his game the way that he's able to make impact the most consistently. So he's a player that we've liked a lot in terms of the combination of defensive and offensive output, as well as just just the processing that underpins his entire game. But at number 2, we have a player who is a lot more active in his defensive involvements, also 2024 draft eligible, and funnily enough, a pure winger, not even a centerman here, which goes to show just how strong the defensive output is for this player. So introduce Michael Brandsegg-Nygard for us here.
Absolutely. So Brandsegg-Nygard, 6'1", 195 to 200 pounds. He's been oscillating all year. Just the thing that puts him a notch ahead of Hellenius for me is that with Hellenius defensively, the processing's elite. No one can really match that outside of the number 1 guy on our list. But with Michael Brandsegg-Nygard, his processing is maybe half a notch below Hellenius's, but his proactiveness, his engagement, his physical abilities, his motor, his effort level in general is decently ahead of Hellenius. And that's why there's a gap. There's not much of a gap between the two, but MBN comes out on top for us mainly for those reasons. Brent's all about efficiency in all 3 zones. He makes the right plays with the right level of energy. He doesn't overdo or underdo things. It's all about making the exact play that's required at the right time with the right timing and on the right spots in the ice. Michael Brandsegg-Nygard he reads the play so incredibly well that he's so rarely out of position. He rarely has to scramble and back check because he's right there with the play. He's already a step ahead and has figured out where the puck's going to go. And he's able to kind of react and engage proactively. We saw that especially at the men's worlds. We saw that at the World Junior Championship, and we've seen it all season in the Allsvenskan, but especially in the second half of the year, where he started engaging more offensively, which meant that he was in more situations where he could make a play after a shot because he's a shooter, right? That's what he does. He shoots the puck, and when you shoot the puck, there's going to be a rebound. And who says rebound? Says 50-50 battle. So Michael Brandsegg-Nygard was involved in a lot of 50-50 battles, especially in the offensive zone. And that's where I think he shines the most. His forechecking ability, the way he closes down on players, the angles that he takes, all of it is just so refined, so well thought out and processed that I think Michael Brandsegg-Nygard could have played in an NHL lineup on a 4th line last season. I don't think it would have been the most efficient, but he could have stuck around. He would have had a decent enough impact to be an above replacement defensive player in the NHL last year on a 4th line. Now, do I think he should play in the NHL this year? No. I think he should be playing in the SHL, or at least some level of pro hockey, whether it's the AHL or overseas, just a top level of pro hockey, because as good as the Allsvenskan is, it's not the SHL, it's not Liga, it's not the KHL, it's not the AHL, and especially not the NHL. So I think that's the next step for MBN there. But overall, there's just so much to work with there with MBN. I think he's got so much defensive ability, so much engagement, so much effort, so much understanding of how to be a defensive player that he easily makes a second rank here on our list. And let's just not waste any time with the first overall pick. We already know who it is. Macklin Celebrini is the top NHL-affiliated two-way forward. But with Celebrini, it's not just the offensive skill. We know how good he is offensively, what he can do with the puck, how clutch he is, how willing he is to show up in big games and big moments and take teams by control. But the defensive side of his game is genuinely so strong. It starts in the defensive zone positioning as a center. He engages early. He gets involved in battles. He knows when to sit back or when to go into battles as well. He doesn't crowd the puck and make situations unnecessarily chaotic. He's really good at controlling the play in that sense. And then once he gets the puck, he's just so good at facilitating breakouts and entering the offensive zone that was most of his sequences last year with Boston University. Make a defensive play, get the puck back, play it out to a defenseman, skate up the ice, get the puck, drive the net, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. It was so beautiful to watch him this season. But yeah, effort level and engagement wise, what do you think about Macklin Celebrini's effort level? I think it's top in the class.
It's really good. He's constantly engaged. He keeps his feet moving and he keeps his brain ticking. He's always scanning, like one of the most refined and polished players that we've scouted in the past couple seasons, in terms of just how like holistic his game already is. There aren't really holes in his game like right now, I would say. Like there are things that he could still improve on, certainly, but there's no gaping hole at all in his overall toolkit and his impact on the ice. So in the defensive zone, we were seeing it all season long as well, how low he would drop down to support his defenseman. And oftentimes in the defensive zone, it almost looked like a 3-1-1 or 3-2 type of system with Celebrini down at the height of the defenseman and applying pressure down low. But just a very fantastic player. He's so intelligent. He's not the most dynamic player from the past couple draft classes. He can't quite compete with like the Bedards of the world in that category, but he's just so polished, and that extends to his defensive impact too. I think that this is a guy who might not be a plus level defensive guy as an NHL rookie just yet, but probably will be by the time he's playing his sophomore season. Like he's going to need to get accustomed to the NHL pace and NHL style and physicality for sure. And I think the offense might come a little bit faster than the defensive impact will, but a player that is going to be a routine, like maybe even Selke candidate at the NHL level once he's in his prime. I think that the upside for that is there. So a player that had no issue topping out this particular list.
For sure. He's a two-way forward in the sense that Sidney Crosby's a two-way forward, I would say. That's the comparable that's been thrown out all year. He doesn't have necessarily the franchise, the next one type of talent, but he's up there in terms of talent, and defensively, kind of the same impact you get from Sidney Crosby. Just so effective, so reliable, always in the right spots, all that good stuff. But that
definitely some stylistic similarities between those two guys.
100%. But that wraps things up for today's show. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe. Leave us a comment letting us know what you want us to talk about next. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, please leave us a rating review and make sure to make us your first listen of the day. For your second listen of the day, make sure to check out Locked On Sports Today. They've got all your news and updates about what's going on around sports. And make sure to tune in for our next shows as we continue our prospects coverage for the month of July. This has been Hattie Kalakash with Sebastian High, and we hope you tune in next time.